Have you ever had a situation where maybe there's somebody that you've known for a long time, but then they say or do something and you realize, I don't actually know them very well at all? Or maybe the same thing has happened to you, but in reverse. Maybe there are people that you're around all the time, people you would even call friends, but then you hang out, but then you leave feeling like they don't really get me. Nobody really knows me on like a deep level. This can really show up if you have a situation where you're dealing with something that's really hard or you feel something that is really strong, but then you decide not to tell anybody, like not to confide in anyone because you don't think that other people would understand or that they would care. Or maybe you do share it and then you feel like the people that you shared it with just didn't value it, like they kind of blew it off. They didn't get that it was important to you at all. For most of us, our friends are probably the people that get us the most. And some of you might have a friend, two, maybe a handful that you feel like really get you. You can just really be yourself around them like 100%. But I would say for the vast majority of people, they don't feel like there's anyone, maybe one or two people that really get them on a deep level. Now, this is totally normal. But wouldn't it be nice if more people understood us, all of our quirks and our interests and our struggles and our fears, but most of the time we feel like nobody really gets us. And you know what else? You know who else feels this way? Literally everyone. Almost everybody feels that way because the truth is that nobody gets me or nobody knows the real me feeling. It's not easy, but it's also not rare. It's pretty common. It's one of the reasons why we all really crave these deep, personal, close relationships. We all want them so badly because whether or not you know this, you were wired to be known. You were made to have somebody who gets you, who understands you, and who knows what your world, what your real inner world is like. And this, my friends, brings us to a guy named Zacchaeus. Now, before we get into Jesus' interaction with Zacchaeus, it's good to have some context about this interaction and why it might have been included in Scripture. So the Gospel of Luke is the only gospel that tells the story of Zacchaeus. And there's a reason for that. Luke is writing to a mostly not Jewish audience. The first followers of Jesus were Jewish, and they kind of figured that everyone who followed Jesus would probably be Jewish. But as we know, that's not the way that Jesus operates. He was for anyone from any background. And so it's natural for people that were not Jewish, that were interested in following Jesus, to feel like, oh, maybe I don't quite fit in with this whole Jesus movement thing. So in Luke's gospel, there are lots of stories about people who maybe feel like they didn't fit in. And it's easy to imagine that these are the people that Luke wrote about because these are the people that Luke is writing to. He wants his readers to see how Jesus treats people that feel like maybe they aren't involved, maybe they can't be included in this. So Luke shares this story of Zacchaeus, who was on the outside of the group. Now, he actually was Jewish, but he was a tax collector. And during this time, that was not a good thing to be. Essentially, he would have been viewed as a sellout and a traitor among the Jewish people because he worked for the Roman government to tax his own people. But then Jesus comes to town, and everyone is super eager to see Jesus. By this point, Jesus is incredibly well known, and people are asking questions like, is he really who the rumors say that he is? Is he really healing people and performing miracles? Is he really going to challenge the powers that seem to be in charge of everything? Everyone wants to see, what is Jesus like? Is he really as good as we've been told that he is? And Zacchaeus is no different. So he shows up. Now, to get a better view of Jesus, Zacchaeus climbs a tree. Now, in some ways, this is practical because Zacchaeus was short. But also, I imagine Zacchaeus probably wasn't sure about how Jesus would feel about a guy like him, a guy who collected taxes for the Romans and probably collected a little extra to keep for himself, because that's what tax collectors were known to do. Jesus looked out for people that were poor and had been mistreated. And then here's tax collector Zacchaeus, who's in the business of mistreating people and helping them to become poor. So I imagine he just kind of wanted to like lay low, blend in, because maybe he was not so sure about, well, like, what would Jesus actually think about me? But then the craziest thing happens. Jesus is passing through and he looks up in that tree and he sees him and he calls out to him and he invites himself over to Zacchaeus' house for dinner. Luke records it in chapter 19, verse 5 this way. He says, when Jesus came by, he looked up at Zacchaeus and called him by name. Zacchaeus, he said, quick, come down. I must be a guest in your home today. Now, we hear that from our 2020 American perspective, and we might be thinking, that's a little bold, Jesus. You're like, cook me dinner. I'm coming over, not calling ahead. But in this context, in this culture, it was an honor to host someone for dinner. Having someone in your home sent a message that you wanted to be their friend. So Zacchaeus isn't sitting in that tree being like, this Jesus guy's kind of rude. He's inviting himself over to my house. He's most likely sitting in that tree being like, I cannot believe that Jesus would want to have dinner with me. And he announced it loud enough where like everyone here could hear him say that he was going to come to my house. Luke records this in chapter 19, verse 6. He says, so Zacchaeus came down at once and welcomed him, Jesus, gladly. So why did Jesus invite himself over to Zacchaeus' house? Well, because Jesus cared about what Zacchaeus cared about. You see, even though it doesn't seem like it on the outside from what we know about Zacchaeus as a tax collector, Zacchaeus cared about things like belonging. He wanted to belong. He wanted to be accepted. He wanted to be seen, and he wanted to be known. And how do I know that? Because you might be thinking, JT, you weren't there, and it didn't say that. In the Bible, it did not say that. Here's how I know that. Because Zacchaeus was human, and all human beings want those things. All of us do. And we want it more when we feel like we don't have them. We want to belong more when we feel like we don't belong. We want to be accepted more when we feel like we're not accepted. We want to be seen and known for who we are when we feel like we might not be. You see, Zacchaeus had lived his whole life as an outsider. As a Jewish man, he didn't fit with the Romans, even though he worked for them, and he didn't fit with his Jewish neighbors because he was taxing them on behalf of the Roman government. Zacchaeus wasn't just climbing a tree to see Jesus. He was climbing a tree to see if he mattered to Jesus and to see if Jesus knew what mattered to him. And don't miss this because it surprises everyone. People don't expect a friendship to form between Jesus and the local outcast. They liked Jesus. They wanted to be around him. They thought he was a great guy. They didn't want to be around Zacchaeus. In fact, they probably thought they already knew everything they needed to know about Zacchaeus. They're like, he's a tax collector. He's a jerk. That's all I need to know. But not Jesus. Jesus knew that just because Zacchaeus worked as a tax collector, it doesn't tell the whole story about who he is as a person. Jesus knew Zacchaeus better than anyone around him did. First, Jesus knew his name. Jesus understood Zacchaeus was just a person who wanted to belong like everybody else. And Jesus went over to his place to show him, you belong. You're included in this. If you've ever wondered about what Jesus thinks of you, I hope that this story of Jesus' interaction with Zacchaeus is encouraging to you. You may have felt that there were certain things that mattered to Jesus, though. For example, you may have felt like, well, Jesus does probably care about whether or not I read the Bible, but he probably doesn't care about my grades, even though that really matters to me. Or he probably does care about whether or not I pray, but he's probably not that interested in my friendships or lack of friendships. Or I know Jesus cares about like holy stuff, but he probably doesn't care about real life stuff. Or, you might have felt like he cares about your cussing, but not your anxiety, or he cares about your obedience, but not your broken relationship with your dad, or that he cares about your sexual purity, but may not care about your broken heart in your last dating relationship. Today, I want you to know that Jesus knows your name. He knows your name, and he knows the things that matter to you, and they matter to him. The things that interest you, they interest him. He doesn't just know that you love basketball or K-pop or theater. He gets why. He knows you personally. He made you. You see, our God is not a far off, distant, uninterested God. He made you. He knows your name. He knows your heart. And so you might say to yourself, well, JT, how can you be so confident? Because I look at the way that Jesus interacted with Zacchaeus. He shows him, I know you. I know your name. I know what you care about. And so the same is true for us. Jesus says, I know your name. I know what's in your heart. And we can receive this as very good news. And then we go and share that, and then we engage with others in a way where we desire to know their hearts. That's why this week I want to challenge you to do two things. First, I want you to just talk with Jesus about what matters to you. Just be gut level honest. Just have conversations with him as you go through your day. Jesus cares about what you care about. So start there. Pray about it. Share it with him. Let him know about the things you like, the things that stress you out. Tell him about the things that bring you life and the things that drain you. Jesus is not bored in hearing from you. You're not bothering him. You are personal to him. He's not far off and distant. He knows your name. The second thing I would encourage you to do is to talk to other people about what interests them. And here's why this is critically important. When it came to Zacchaeus, I want you to think about the message that the crowd had sent him. They made assumptions about him. They didn't really bother to get to know him or to really hear his heart. What they did is they did what we often do. They said, I know what you do for a living. That's all I need to know. Jesus was the one that knew what mattered to Zacchaeus because he looked at his heart. He offered him a sense of belonging. So it's possible that there are people around you that maybe you've thought that you know everything that you need to know about them, that you've kind of formed an idea about them without really getting to know them. Maybe you haven't really made that effort to go beyond a surface level relationship. I want to encourage you to think of someone that maybe you've done that with, and I want you to really just try to get to know them, get to know their heart, move beyond the surface. You know, in his letter to the church in Philippi, the Apostle Paul wrote about this very idea in Philippians chapter 2, verse 3. He says, rather in humility, value others above yourself, not looking to your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. Look out for the interests of others. That might mean ask your friends questions about what they're going through, about their struggles, about their insecurities, and then listen to their answers. Or maybe do something with your younger siblings that maybe you don't really want to do, but it matters to them, so it's going to matter to you. Or maybe just make an effort to be curious about other people. Ask lots of questions. Ask your parents what is on their mind, on their heart, and really listen to their answer. It might not be what you think it is. You know, from there, Paul goes on to talk about the character of Jesus and what Jesus was like. And Paul reminds us to do this. He says, you know, we're going to make Jesus our model. We're going to make him our example because that's exactly what Jesus was like. He was selfless. He looked out for the interests of others. And we should do the same thing. That's what's going to make us stand out as his followers, that we're the people who bother to get to know other people's hearts. When we take the time to make it personal with others, we're living like Jesus. Jesus was never satisfied making a judgment about a person from far away. He got close. He took time. And he never let a label or assumption or a job description inform his opinion. He cared about what mattered to others because they mattered to him. It's personal because Jesus knows what matters to you. And then you have the chance to go and do the same for others.